The African Association of Automotive Manufacturers was formed back in 2015. It arose from the experience we had with a number of original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, advising the government of Nigeria on their desire to have an automotive development program. And it became clear that an organized structure could give more effective advice. And it was also clear that there was a need to support the development of the automotive manufacturing sector in Africa. So we've advocated now for some years the development of a program to develop the automotive sector in Africa. We gave this presentation in a number of places, but most recently also at the Inter-African Trade Fair in Durban, where we addressed many ministers and associations. The AAAM has now expanded to incorporate investors, component suppliers, financial institutions, the African Export-Import Bank. So it's now very representative of the potential structure of an automotive sector across Africa. The reason there's so much attention to this is that the current position with regard to the automotive sector in Africa is quite clearly suboptimal for the continent. Currently, Africa produces only about 1.1% of the total global vehicle fleet, and this is located in two major sites, South Africa, just over 600,000 units, and Morocco, a more recent development and a very successful one, at over 400,000 units. So approximately 1 million vehicles being produced in Africa, new vehicles. There are smaller production sites in Egypt as well, and there are a scattering of smaller, very light assembly type operations across Africa in various places. Now, the reason this position is so suboptimal is that the bulk of Africa's vehicle fleet is provided by the importation of pre-owned vehicles. These are second-hand pre-owned vehicles that are coming out of the USA, Europe, and Japan. They come with a wide range of different standards. They're built for different conditions to those in Africa, by and large. And they come in because they're cheap. It actually is economically efficient to export these vehicles rather than incur the costs of scrapping them in the industrialized countries they come from. So Africa basically imports the bulk of its vehicle requirements outside of Morocco and South Africa, and this is not really sustainable either from a balance of payments point of view. There's a gigantic deficit on the balance of payments in the automotive sector, and as our economies grow, this deficit is not really sustainable for the much larger economies in Africa. The rate of motorization in Africa is also very low, on average 42 vehicles per 1,000 people, versus a global average of about 182 vehicles per 1,000 people. So we're underutilizing it. We're bringing in vehicles that are not designed for Africa. And of course, there's a considerable structural change taking place in the automotive sector with the fairly rapid move towards the new drivetrains, mainly electric vehicles, electric battery-driven vehicles. So we need to change this. If you look at the projections that AAAM have done over the years, at reasonable rates of growth, the growth in demand for new vehicles in Africa will remain very low. It doesn't offer exciting prospects for the two existing manufacturers because of this dominance of second-hand vehicles. There's a lack of finance, there are very few policy interventions in regard to new vehicles. Only a few countries, Morocco, Egypt, South Africa, actually ban the importation of second-hand vehicles. And because of the lack of affordable vehicle finance, there's this pressure to continue importing the cheap pre-owned vehicles, but that comes at a high macroeconomic cost. We've done quite a lot of projections with different scenarios for reasons which I'll explain in a moment. We are advocating a particular policy type structure. And what this does is it encourages not only the production of a new vehicle, but also the export of those vehicles, and begins to integrate the production process in Africa with the global system. So in the case of both Morocco and South Africa, they manufacture a limited range of vehicles, and through a specific mechanism I'll touch on in a moment, they then import the balance of their models. And the balance of payments in South Africa and Morocco is generally balance of payments neutral. We export pretty much what we import, and in many years it's actually positive. So we call this the African production equivalent model, where you export and import vehicles. And the estimates indicate that by 2035, you could get anywhere between 3 and 5 million new vehicles produced, some exported, others for African domestic use, which is a considerable growth, a much larger amount of vehicles than currently the prospects offer. Just as a comparison, as we've indicated, if you take India, there are about 32 million people with an income of $10,000 per annum, which is a rough benchmark used as to when entry-level vehicles get purchased. So they have 32 million people. They've got currently 4 million new vehicles being produced. In Africa, there's 34 million people above this $10,000, but we only have a new vehicle market of somewhere like 1.5 million. So what can be achieved in the African situation, we have a pointer to that in what's happening in India. If we were to develop an agreement amongst a number of African countries, this industry is a very advanced form of manufacturing. It's based on economies of scale. So around the world, not all countries have an automotive industry. There's a tendency for there to be certain sites of assembly and then regional clusters around those sites producing componentry and feeding into the supply chain of the production centers. So we'd envisage a few production economies emerging, probably the larger ones in West Africa, North Africa, East Africa and Southern Africa. We've already got, as we've said, South Africa and Morocco. And the idea would be that each of these countries would adopt an automotive policy, but we would harmonize those policies based on this mechanism of what we call a trade-related investment measure. This is a measure where the OEMs are encouraged to produce a limited number of models at longer production runs, and then they can rebate the duty on other models within their stable that they import. It's worked very effectively in South Africa, and it's not heavily dependent on fiscal resources. So it's certainly the best path for Africa to try and fast track the development of its automotive sector. And we believe that anywhere between 3 to 5 million vehicles could be produced. 5 million we think is eminently achievable. This would have a significant impact on Africa. It's estimated that that would probably mean an additional 20 to 25 major automotive assembly plants, new plants emerging in Africa by 2035. If you compare, for example, is this achievable? Are we not being overly ambitious? China rose from virtually no vehicles being produced in 1990s to now the largest producer of vehicles, 25 million in China. So a big market demand, proper policies put in place, we believe could bring about an African automotive manufacturing sector. The steps we're taking currently is a lot of work being done. We're working with specific economies. AAAM worked with Ghana to develop its automotive development program. We're working with Egypt. We've worked with Kenya, Ethiopia, Of course, in South Africa, we also engaged with the South African Automotive Master Plan. So the step we're at the moment is largely one of trying to deal with automotive policy programs in specific economies. This has also now gained a great deal of traction with the introduction of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, where negotiations on the rules of origin are very much on the way. The rules of origin for the automotive sector are going to be pretty complex, and we've proposed to the negotiating council, the Council of Ministers, and to the Secretariat that a special package should be put together for auto, which will allow the development of new manufacturing capacity in a number of African economies. So this would help encourage regional cooperation. So you'd have economies that would be more focused on the assembly process. Their regional partners would, through regional cooperation programs, be able to access the supply chain for the African automotive sector. And we then envisage pulling that together into an African Automotive Manufacturing Pact. This is similar to what has been done in Southeast Asia in recent times, and of course in the North American Automotive Pact that was done in the early stages prior to NAFTA. So that pact would then sit within the broader African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and the AAAM is of the view that this is probably the most effective and realistic way that we can bring about an automotive manufacturing sector in Africa. If we continue on the present path, we continue to import pre-owned vehicles, we continue to import vehicles that are not designed for most African conditions, and we fall out of a major, Africa does not become part of a major new industrial economy, particularly at a time when it is changing some of its basic technology in the drivetrain. The AAAM will continue to work as hard as possible with those governments that are looking to design an automotive policy, and we are working very hard at the moment with a number of associations, European associations, to cooperate with them, and we hope that we will see the development of an automotive pact in Africa, and Africa producing some 5 million new vehicles around by 2035, and entering the global automotive value chain and global automotive production and trade system. That's our ambition. We believe we can get there. Thank you very much.